Today, we're going to talk about four single men and how they started a holiday that eventually became a very, very big shopping festival. So today we're talking about 11/11. And before we start, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of 11/11, right? So how did 11/11 actually start? Because when we were asking around, most people assumed that the e-commerce companies were the ones who started 11/11. Because obviously 11/11 is a very big shopping festival, not just in China, but in the rest Southeast Asia as well. Interesting fact, 11/11 actually started in 1993 by four single students in Nanjing University. So we will have a photo of the dorm here, if Jangan can find it later, where they were probably sitting and discussing this Singles Day.
It was kind of interesting. 1993 was, I think, a few years after the reform and opening up, and people go to universities. They have a sense of unease about the future, but they know that the future will be better. And it's also the first time that people started looking at, some of the new technologies. I think Nanjing University was, I think, back then ranked number 3 in China. My high school classmates, 43 of them, 12 of them ended up in this university.
Were any of them the four single men?
No, I mean,
One of the four single
much
men.
younger than that, but I've been to the university dorm. So it's very, very interesting. First, it's very hot in summer. There was once I was there shortly after the summer holiday. It was at 38 degrees. So, so think about that. I mean, like young students, when it's hot, what do you do? This was before the computer games.
You drink.
You end up spending lots of time chatting because you can't sleep.
So that's probably how the idea of this came about, right? So they were having a discussion and then they kind of decided that 11/11, Singles Day, should be a day to celebrate being single, right? And therefore, it became kind of like a small movement in the school. Space, can you go to the slide 3? They have like posters about it.
There were lots of posters from the Cultural Revolution era. I mean, celebrating the proletariat, whatever. But they replaced the proletariat, the workers, with the single men. And this poster particularly says that 11/11, the singles are invisible.
So it was really created just to celebrate singlehood, right? But of course,
They actually made lots of very interesting analogies. So 11 is not only single, and I think back then, I think when I was at visiting the university once, they said, okay, I'm going to the town because the university just created campus, which is across the Yangtze River from the main city center. And of course, there's nothing to do there. So one person was telling me, oh, I'm going to town tomorrow. I said, okay, how do you go there? He said, I'm going to cross the bridge, then I'm going to take the bus number 11. I said, what is bus number 11? I'm going to walk.
okay. I feel like that joke still exists these days. Like I've heard it, but from like
No, I think nowadays has become more difficult. I think over the years, when the internet came about, or this, I think when W11 was, the Singles Day was created before the internet. But when the internet came, this is where people who obviously had nothing else to do in university, they started creating all these posters, all these memes and stuff, and things caught fire. And it just became something that everyone knew about. I think Alibaba and e-commerce platforms, they look at it, they said, okay, that's a perfect opportunity for us to do something about it.
we were at the Alibaba campus like 2 weeks ago, and so we were watching a video about Alibaba's first ever 11/11, right, which was in 2009. And someone asked us, like, was one of the founders single? Which is why he decided to hold the sale on like 11/11 itself.
Was that single? Can't remember.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, right? Because it started as sort of like unofficial holiday, but now it's kind of very strongly associated with e-commerce platforms. Most people, I would say, don't know that 11/11 is something outside of e-commerce platforms. They just think it's a date that e-commerce platforms have created, right?
So there's a saying that the e-commerce successfully hijacked a celebration of the singles and created something that the shopping festival, which is, I mean, maybe it's really incorrect to say that that is actually for women, because most of the buyers are women.
But it's like, a good way to celebrate singlehood is to spend money on yourself. Retail therapy. So actually, the 11/11 sales could be celebrating singlehood as well. Yeah, because single people have nothing to spend money on except themselves, so you can go shopping. So
Try to find it.
we talked about how Alibaba's first ever single sales was 2009. That's like 15 years ago, right? And back then, so we were watching the video at the Alibaba campus. They had this whole kind of like short video on how 1111 started, the whole process behind it. It was quite interesting. They had about only 27 brands who joined this, and I think they have a picture of the Alibaba team in the office on the day itself.
What time was it? 11?
11:20 p.m.
That's PM, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming this is PM. So
basically they stayed all the way until almost midnight, and that's when they hit a record.
50 million. Yeah.
And that was handwritten. In the beginning, I think you saw the video and you heard the stories from some of the earlier guys that I think initially it was red tag. It was scrappy, right? I mean,
And I think you even mentioned their website like crashed in the first few hours of the first ever 1111 just because I think the volume that they were getting was so unexpected. Like the traffic was way too high compared to what they were expecting, right?
Yeah. So
And then of course over 15 years, the 1111 we see now is very, very different.
It's very different. They stopped doing the gala, I think, over the last 2 years. But when they were still doing that, there was a very elaborate show. I think right before the pandemic or during the first 1 or 2 years of the pandemic, it was a very elaborate gala. I think for this we can put that photo of, the digital numbers, and instead of having something handwritten at the end of the page, they say, okay, in the first 5 seconds or first 5 minutes,
this is how much GMV.
Yeah. And that's what? 50,000.
50 million.
50 million. Oh, there's no dot. Okay.
50 million, yeah.
50 million. I think now it's in the thousands of billions.
Billions, yeah.
So of course things have evolved a lot. And you mentioned that during the first iteration, the server broke, right?
Yes. The server crashed. But I think it's just because they weren't expecting that amount of test and volume.
Yeah.
But of course, I do think 1111 is kind of a way for them to, now, I guess it's kind of a way for them to test new systems as well.
I mean, it has been that over the years, actually. The servers were not the only things which broke during the first few iterations of W11. The payment also broke, right? Logistics, I mean,
Logistics probably couldn't keep up.
yeah, your warehouse will be overwhelmed, right? Saying that shit. I mean, so many orders are coming, so many parcels are coming. How can I cope with that? Then that was causing delays. And of course, in some other companies, people might come to the conclusion of saying that, okay, this is not feasible, let's scale down. But I think the whole ecosystem came together to actually resolve all these problems. Actually, I mean, there are lots of sort of theories about why Alipay was created. Actually, one of the reasons was I mean, of course, there's a trust, the escrow and everything. But one reason is that when you rely on third-party payment systems, I mean, sometimes you will process like thousands of orders every second. What happens? Because when you use a third-party payment system, you need to send a signal, like credit card, right? You need to get the other party to approve, and the other party will break. This is when I said, okay, why don't we just have all the payments in our own ecosystem, so that, okay, whenever the consumer makes a payment, it's basically deducting a number from their balance and put that into the merchant's balance, and they I mean, in like 7 days, whatever, then you pay the money out to the merchant. So you bypass the dependency on third parties, and then that became something scalable.
It also probably makes it easier for you to fix, right? Because if obviously your own payment can't handle that volume, you can fix it yourself. You can't go to your third-party player and be like, please fix it. There's only this one day of a year where I suddenly have a lot of traffic and I need you to be able to like deal with this volume.
I think the Chinese players were already better in the sense that they were always being standby. Imagine yourself, say, some European companies, when you have a problem, they ask you to send an email.
Out of working hours, don't bother me.
Yeah.
But I think 1111 isn't just a test for these e-commerce platforms themselves, right? So traditionally 1111, as well as the mid-year 18 June sale, shopping festival, 618.
That was the birthday of JD, allegedly.
Yeah, 618 sales used to serve as sort of a key barometer for consumer confidence in China. So people would look at like the GMV that these companies were reporting to see how much consumers were willing to spend. But that seems to be changing over the recent few years, right? So Jianggan, you wrote a commentary on CNA, which will be linked in the show notes below. It's called what 1111 single days sales no longer says about China's economy. And why do you think this is the case? So like why have essentially, we haven't mentioned this, but companies have sort of reporting their GMV over the past 2-3 years. Now they sort of report more vague metrics, right? So like Taobao just reported, oh, we had growth in GMV, record number of active buyers. JD reported, 20% increase in number of shoppers compared to last year. Why have these platforms kind of stopped reporting GMV? And why do these sales no longer serve as sort of like a barometer for consumer confidence?
I think when something which is growing fast and Jeremy serves as this like top line figure which excites people, different parts of the ecosystem. But as the growth is no longer as fast as it used to be, the purpose of this or the usefulness of this to excite and encourage the whole ecosystem kind of diminishes. There was some skepticism about GMV. Philip, if you can go to that page about GMV. So people are saying that, okay, what do we account as GMV? Because, I mean, you say that, okay, it's the number of the total amount of sales reported, right? But what does that mean? If you look at this chart, there are so many different ways and different layers. Does it mean that, okay, I have made order with this amount? Does that mean that I have paid for this as a consumer? Does that mean that, okay, the order has been dispatched? So it's complex. And some people questioning that, which I think back then we put forward arguments saying that, I mean, there's no need to do that because it's just a macro number which is used to encourage and motivate the whole ecosystem. But of course, now we are in a situation where the economy was not growing as big or as fast as it used to be. I mean, even if the confidence about economy is still good, you might not be as excited as before with the single sales event because a couple of factors. One key factor is actually Pinduoduo because Pinduoduo started this low price throughout the year.
So then you don't really have to wait for sales.
That diminishes the appeal of the shopping festival. Or put it in other words, that makes it a higher hurdle for brands, sellers, and the participants of the sale to offer something even more aggressive to consumers to make it stand out.
Another thing that we'll talk about. So obviously when 11/11 started, it was just a one-day event, right? It's kind of like a big event for a lot of companies because obviously everybody is preparing. There's a lot of this like excitement for just this one-day sale. But now we've seen that 11/11 has kind of shifted. It's no longer just on 11/11 itself.
It's kind of
now it stretches out over like a month, right? And this is something we discussed in our 100th episode about the 150 billion parcels. So we were looking at the peak daily parcel volume in China. And the peak this year was the 22nd of October. It's just some random Tuesday. But you said that it's likely because the 11/11 sales had already started.
Yeah, but if you look at this slide, you see the difference between the peak volume and average volume. So it's obviously up, but it's not up by too much. So we visited quite a number of logistic companies.
Yes, I think that obviously stretching 11/11 out over a couple of weeks kind of takes the load off not just logistic players, of course logistic players as well, because we've seen the amount of parcels at literally the mountain of parcels and the parcel slide.
And you see the difference that the same sorting center were there in, I think, mid-October?
Yeah.
Mid-October at the height of W11.
Yes.
And look at the mountains of, and we go back there like 6 weeks later and towards the beginning of December, you see, okay, people
it's still a lot, but it's not like a mountain.
Yeah, people tell you that, okay, now we slack, but you still see lots of parcels there, but people said, okay, this is a low period that we can afford to shut down one facility.
So Black Friday is another big shopping festival, more in the US and Europe, right? So Black Friday also used to be a single day sale where people would queue outside stores at night just to go in and buy stuff at like midnight or 1, 2 a.m. But now that they've kind of extended to last over 1, 2 weeks, doesn't that kind of minimize the consumers' impulsiveness to spend?
I think now they have much more tools to get consumers to spend on impulse, right? If for the whole live commerce thing and the video commerce. And I mean, basically, there are many more tools for you to get consumers to spend on impulse. And many of these tools can be used throughout the year.
So they don't have to wait for like just a big sale.
Again, back to the point that the hurdle rate, you creating something attractive to consumers on a single day is much higher. And also, I mean, you speak with people in the ecosystem, they tell you that, okay, shit, we spend like so much time preparing for W11 and the amount of stress that if it's just one day. In the past, we mentioned about every time you sort of test the system so that at the next year, the system is able to handle much bigger volume. But now I think that purpose is so diminished, right?
Yes, because most shoppers are probably like scrolling through the app throughout the whole week instead of just that single day itself. But then also I feel that now there's not just 11/11. So obviously there are so many other like random dates of sales now, right? So if there's like posters Shopee has like 667788. Lazada has like a March birthday sale. 12 is a thing on not just like Shopee and Lazada, but also on, I think Alibaba has 12 sales as well.
Yeah, 12 is, I think, is something that the commerce platforms in China do.
Yeah.
But in Southeast Asia, particularly, I think Shopee essentially did it like every month, right?
But the thing is, sometimes I'll scroll like before the sale and then I'll like the product, right? And then during the sale, I'll go back and look at it and it's the same price. So they mark up the price and then they give you a 20% discount to make you feel like there's a sale. So with like the increase in number of sales, and obviously now with e-commerce, it's so easy to check the prices. You know when something is actually cheaper.
Yes, I watched the live stream on Douyin where the host spends like a few minutes explaining to me exactly how the price is. It's like then I go to Pinduoduo and realize the price is 30% cheaper. Then I'll place my order there. Because now everybody pretty much has every platform, and competition in many aspects become sort of quite hard to differentiate. I mean, the logistic speed, the selection, etc. So price becomes a differentiator, and the ability to squeeze on efficiency. I mean, it sounds easy, but it actually is not that easy for some people.
Yeah.
And back to Southeast Asia per se, I do think there was a reason why Shopee created all this like monthly sale festivals, because I think in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the availability of sellers and assortment of goods, you don't have the same level as you would have in China. So which means that if you just rely on Double 11, you are not going to, I mean, at the stage where the e-commerce is still growing, right? You're not able to create this huge surge because, I mean, what it can put forward is limited and what it can fulfill is limited. I think even until like last year and stuff, they still rely heavily on third-party payment systems.
Yeah.
So so there's limited you can do, and if your objective is to keep growing, you try to sort of create more of these smaller peaks rather than having one big peak that you know the ecosystem is not able to handle.
But like if you're a consumer and you know that every single month there's going to be a sale, what would make you want to spend like, let's say in a certain month? Because I'm assuming most of the sales are actually the same throughout the year.
I think that depends. I mean, the platforms know that the platform wants to create a competition of different brands coming to the platform to offer the best discounts. But you know the brands in Southeast Asia,
They
right?
also
So
want to make money.
it's I mean, compared to the always cynical, always sort of not cynical, but always on a tool brands in China, because they face very fierce competition. The competition here is not as fierce. So from an e-commerce platform point of view, to convince the brands to give very steep discounts is probably much harder here compared to in China.
Do they give very steep discounts?
I think one of the key reasons the whole live commerce thing took off is the top live hosts in Taobao early days, Li Jiaqi and Via. They were able to negotiate very steep discounts and a lot of freebies for their followers, and that was a key reason why it took off.
Oh, because they had the actual brands, but it was at a much lower price.
Much lower price, and established international brands and offering goods at a much lower price.
So what is this kind of like, I wouldn't say shift, but what does this mean for e-commerce and retailers? So obviously 11/11 or Black Friday, these single day sales used to be a very big thing, right? Consumers would get very excited and then they would want to come and buy. But now I would say the excitement on the day itself has kind of diminished because consumers can look over like 1-2 weeks. And like you said, right, they can always look at other platforms. What does this mean for like e-commerce platforms or retailers in terms of finding better ways instead of sales of engaging with customers?
No, I think at the end of the day, it's always an interesting sort of balance and a game between platforms, the marketplaces, as well as the producers, the brands and stuff. I think the last few years, at least what you see in China, is that some of the offline retailers have been performing very well. So you have Aldi and Sam's Club doing very well, and they're doing very well on sort of e-commerce as well. I think this year's Sam's Club's sales in China, half of that came from e-commerce, from their own platform. So you'll see that when an infrastructure is highly developed and people are competing different things there. So and also customers are segmented, right? So Sam's Club will appeal to people who are relatively sort of middle class, above a bit affluent. They look at all the choices and they said, okay, I'm tired of all these choices. Can you pick a few things for me? And know that you sort of help me get the best deal in this particular category by selecting this product. I mean, in a way, it's the same what Costco is doing in the US.
Yes.
So then, of course, on the other hand, there's still the mass consumers who are looking for unbranded goods at cheap price. So this is what Pinduoduo has been doing very well.
So so I guess there's still a way for retailers to kind of compete with e-commerce platforms.
It is, but I think at the end of the day, it's something which becomes a little bit more nuanced in a sense that you can't depend on one tactic for everyone. That I mean, you have to target specific segments of consumers with specific offerings. I think e-commerce platforms are trying to differentiate as well.
So I think that's all for today's episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you like this week's episode, do like and subscribe, as well as share our YouTube video with your friends if you enjoyed it. And Merry Christmas, because episode is going to go out before Christmas. And happy holidays. Bye bye.
Bye bye.